Israel has confirmed that from Friday it will allow a limited number of trucks carrying humanitarian aid to enter Gaza. The Rafah crossing from Egypt is the only Gazan crossing that Israel doesn't control. Israel controlled its crossings and began airstrikes after Hamas launched those terror attacks on October the 7th, killing at least 1,400 people. The UN reports that more than 3,000 deaths in Gaza since then.
The water may be flowing, but there's no guarantee it's safe to drink. Gaza's water supply is on the brink of collapse. The United Nations says more than 2 million face dehydration and waterborne diseases. As Gaza runs dry, many have no other option than to drink contaminated water.
Often we wait for 2 hours, and at the end we find out there is no water anymore. Water is life. No human can survive without water, whether it's drinkable or not. No one can survive without water. We fill these bottles just to go back and find that it's not drinkable.
In the south, Gazans waited for hours to buy fuel. The population here has swelled after hundreds of thousands fled from northern Gaza.
I've been waiting 4 or 5 hours, and now they say the diesel has run out. We don't know what to do. We don't know where to go. The Israelis told us to evacuate to this place, but they kill us here. Then they say go to that place. They follow us and kill us there also. Why do they tell us to evacuate? Just kill us in our homes.
Israel has blocked supplies through its crossings into Gaza following the terror attacks by Hamas. After talks with Israel and Egypt, the U.S. announced a deal to allow a limited amount of aid from Egypt into Gaza. But the United Nations says the besieged territory needs more.
We urgently need a mechanism agreed by all relevant parties to allow for the regular provision of emergency needs throughout Gaza, to get the level of distribution of assistance up to what it was before these terrible weeks of 100 trucks a day providing assistance throughout Gaza to people in need. We need to get back to that level of ambition.
In neighboring Egypt, at the Rafah border crossing, trucks are waiting for the green light to enter Gaza and deliver the desperately needed aid.
Well, Nour Shawaf is Humanitarian Policy Advisor for Oxfam in the Middle East. She joins us from Beirut. Welcome to DW. Just talk us through why it's so difficult at getting aid into Gaza.
Indeed, it's very difficult to get aid into Gaza. At this very moment, I would say it's even impossible. Aside from the crossings being closed, we're looking at continued airstrikes and bombardment across Gaza, which makes humanitarian operations very difficult, and the delivery of aid to people who are trapped within Gaza, who have no food, very minimal food, who have no water, who have no electricity, who are in need of an utmost need for urgent humanitarian intervention, not being able to access those humanitarian interventions. So we're looking at people who are constantly looking for water, constantly looking for food, constantly looking for any sort of aid that could help them and their families survive.
Tell us more about the lack of access to water. What are your colleagues on the ground telling you about that?
Since the very start of the escalation of the violence, we know that water supply has been cut off to the Gaza Strip. Our colleagues are telling us how the people are having to drink contaminated water because there simply isn't enough clean water for drinking. People are at the brink of not being able to drink at all, but also you're looking at water pumps and wastewater plants that are completely not functional. You're looking at fuel that is not available to operate those water plant and wastewater plants. Our colleagues and Oxfam has been warning of a possible disease outbreak. So we're looking at possible waterborne diseases in Gaza, including cholera, which makes the humanitarian situation, which is already catastrophic, even more catastrophic.
And we heard today about these bombings in southern Gaza. As far as you can tell, is anywhere safe for Gazans to shelter from airstrikes and bombs?
Nowhere is safe in Gaza anymore, and this is exactly what we've been hearing from our colleagues in Gaza. The majority of Oxfam staff in Gaza have been displaced. They're moving from one place to the other, and they're telling us on a daily basis how nowhere in Gaza is safe. Even designated safe shelters are no longer considered safe because of the bombardment and because of the airstrikes. So we're looking at a situation where people do not know where to go. We're looking at a situation where our colleague yesterday was telling us how he was going to buy bread for his family. And as he walked to the bakery, he saw people lying on the floor with no mattresses, with no blankets, how he saw people sleeping in cars and in open spaces, in shops everywhere, because there aren't enough shelters. And even those shelters are not safe.
Thank you so much for joining us, Policy Advisor for Oxfam in the Middle East, Nour Shawaf.
Thank you.
Soraya Ali works with Save the Children, which is also planning to send aid to Gaza through the Rafah crossing. And I asked her what she had heard about the border reopening.
So the situation is extremely fluid. As you know, it's changing day by day and hour by hour. At the moment, our trucks, 2 Save the Children trucks, are at the border, and we're ready to go and deliver aid when it is safe to do so in partnership with the Egyptian Red Crescent. But what's important to remember is that this is delivering food, water, the most basic needs. And Gaza is an extremely densely populated, small patch of land, home to 2.2 million people, half of which are children. So even before the recent escalations in violence, 80% of people in Gaza depended on international aid. So it's absolutely imperative that we can get in there safely and deliver the aid to people who need it most and to children.
Now, the deal is to allow a limited number of trucks in. Can that really make a difference?
It's very difficult to say. As I said, the situation is so fluid, and Gaza is a small strip of land, 365 square kilometers. And right now, people are rationing food, they're rationing water, and they need electricity. So the type of aid that we have ready to go is, hygiene kits. This is basic things that people need to survive, as well as food and water, soap, toothbrushes. We're looking at really basic things that need to go through, and the sheer scale of the issue is so big, with over 1 million people looking around in Gaza almost displaced. So we really need a lot of aid to go through.
Now, what kind of support and access do aid organizations like yours actually need to continue working in the area?
Well, first and foremost, we absolutely need a ceasefire, and we need all parties to agree to that. It's almost impossible to deliver aid and give people supplies if you're under constant bombardment. So we need a ceasefire, we need a de-escalation of the violence, we need the violence to stop, and we also need all parties to adhere to international humanitarian law. So protecting civilian spaces like hospitals and schools where people are sheltering is absolutely imperative.
Soraya Ali there from Save the Children. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Bahira Amin, a journalist from Cairo, told us why it is so complicated to get aid into Gaza.
So at this point, Egypt has maintained that it has never actually closed the Rafah border crossing, but that 4 rounds of airstrikes on the Palestinian side have forced it closed. And again, this is the only passage in and out of Gaza that is not controlled by Israel. So on one side, Egypt has maintained that it has kept it open, but the Palestinian side of the border crossing has not been operational. Meanwhile, there is this increasingly desperate sense of urgency. While Egypt can't guarantee safe passage of the aid that's been piled up on its side of the border. So it was 3 days ago that the WHO's regional director told my colleague that Gaza had 24 hours left of essential supplies. Anything that remains now is being rationed beyond belief. And so Egypt has said that it needs guarantees of safe passage. It needs to know that trucks are not going to be targeted, that it is going to be delivered safely to where it needs to go. And since Israel has bombed the crossing, the roads the trucks need to take, the safe areas that the aid would get to, since they have been targeted, Egypt needs time to repair, which is why President Joe Biden said last night that it likely won't be until Friday, although we're hoping for a sooner timeline. And it would be up to 20 trucks. Obviously, that's close to nothing. There are hundreds waiting in northern Sinai to be allowed in, but this can be seen as a first gesture. And if things go well, Egypt is committed to both keeping Rafah open for aid to come in and humanitarian and medical cases to come out.
For the people to come out, that you just mentioned, Egyptian officials have made aid deliveries into Gaza a condition for the evacuation of foreign passport holders. What more do you know about that?
So the conversation on foreign nationals goes back to the first agreement from the first few days of the war. The US had considered that agreement all but done, that foreign nationals would be allowed to exit Gaza. But then we learned that Egypt had made that conditional on humanitarian aid going in. What they said was that the Rafah crossing cannot be used only for safe exit for foreign nationals. So it has been a point of communication for European and world leaders who have visited Cairo, who have spoken with Egyptian leaders. But we have not learned more on that. But now that we're starting to see some movement, if those 20 trucks make it safely, we can imagine that we could also see movement on foreign nationals. Egypt hasn't said anything explicitly, but because it has committed to medical cases and humanitarian cases coming out, we can imagine that they wouldn't just block foreign nationals as well.
Bahira Amin there, reporting from Cairo for us. Thank you.
Thank you.